Let me ask you something and answer this honestly. When did dating start to feel less exciting and more like a second job you never applied for? Because for most people, the exhaustion doesn't come from heartbreak alone. It comes from effort without clarity, from showing up, opening up, trying again, and feeling like nothing is really moving forward. You're tired, but not because you don't care. You're tired because you care. Here's the hard truth most people won't say out loud. Dating today feels exhausting because you're putting emotional energy into situations that were never designed to give anything back. And the worst part, you often don't realize it's happening until you're already depleted. Think about it. You're texting someone you barely know, analyzing tone, timing, emojis, like you're decoding ancient hieroglyphics. You're wondering, did I say too much? Or should I wait before replying? And suddenly you're mentally negotiating with someone who hasn't earned that level of access to you. That's not romance, that's emotional labor, and no one told you there would be unpaid overtime. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Dating doesn't feel exhausting because there are too many options. It feels exhausting because you're trying to be chosen instead of choosing. That subtle shift, trying to prove your worth instead of assess theirs, is what drains you. Fear sneaks in. Fear of missing out, fear of being alone, fear that if this doesn't work, you'll have to start all over again. And fear makes people overextend. Let me pause you right here with a quick pattern interrupt. If dating were a gym workout, most people aren't tired because the weights are too heavy. They're tired because they're lifting weights that aren't even theirs. Someone else's confusion, someone else's inconsistency, someone else's mixed signals. No wonder you're exhausted. You're carrying baggage you didn't pack. And here's the sneaky part. Exhaustion starts to feel normal. You tell yourself this is just how dating is now. But that belief quietly lowers your standards. You begin accepting crumbs because at least crumbs require less effort than starting over. That's when excitement fades. Urgency creeps in. You're not dating to discover connection anymore. You're dating to end the process. But let me tell you something crucial. The goal of dating is not to make it through. It's to feel energized by the right interactions and repelled by the wrong ones. If every date leaves you drained, that's not bad luck. That's data. And in a moment, I'm going to explain the specific behavior that keeps people stuck in this exhausting cycle, the one mistake almost everyone makes without realizing it. Because once you see it, dating doesn't just get easier, it gets lighter. The mistake that keeps most people exhausted in dating is that they confuse potential with progress. And that confusion quietly drains their energy long before anything real has a chance to form. Because when you date potential, you're not responding to what's actually happening. You're investing in a future version of someone that only exists in your imagination. Potential feels exciting because it promises relief. You tell yourself it's still early, or they just need time, or once they feel secure, things will change. And each of those thoughts delays a decision your body already understands. Your intuition notices the inconsistency, the lack of follow-through, the way effort comes in bursts instead of a steady stream. But fear steps in and says, what if walking away means starting over? So you stay, you wait, you hope. And waiting is exhausting in a way most people don't recognize. Waiting keeps your nervous system alert. You're checking your phone more than you'd like to admit. You're rereading messages. You're scanning for signs that things are moving forward. There's no rest in that state. There's no grounding. Just a quiet sense that you're hovering instead of building. Here's a simple way to see it clearly. If someone shows interest but not consistency, your mind fills in the gaps. You start interpreting intention instead of observing behavior. And that mental effort, constantly translating, explaining, justifying, becomes emotional labor. Dating stops being about discovery and starts feeling like work. What makes this even heavier is the fear of loss. Not losing the person, but losing the time you've already invested. So instead of pulling back when something feels off, you lean in harder. You give more understanding, more flexibility, more benefit of the doubt. And slowly your standards don't disappear. They just get postponed. This is why so many people feel drained after dates that technically went well. Nothing bad happened. No argument. No red flags that feel dramatic enough to justify leaving. Just a lingering sense of effort without ease. Chemistry without calm. Interest without security. And here's the truth most people don't hear. Connection that's right for you doesn't require constant emotional vigilance. It doesn't keep you guessing where you stand. It doesn't make you feel like you have to earn basic consistency. If you're constantly anxious, that isn't attraction doing its job. It's uncertainty running the show. There's a subtle shift people make that keeps them stuck in this cycle, even when they're smart, self-aware, and emotionally available. And once you see that shift clearly, the exhaustion starts to make sense. And more importantly, it starts to lift. So let's break down why overinvesting early keeps you trapped in this cycle of exhaustion. Most people think the key to dating success is giving more attention, more time, more patience. And sure, effort matters, but not all effort is created equal. The kind of effort that drains you is effort you're giving before the other person has proven they're ready to meet you halfway. That's like running a marathon when your legs aren't even warmed up. It looks impressive, but it's unsustainable. When you show up emotionally too soon, you send the signal that you're available for anything, and that's tempting. People love it because it feels easy for them, but it leaves you empty. You're doing the work of establishing connection, but they're not doing the work of showing up consistently. Over time, the imbalance builds up, and your nervous system starts carrying tension it shouldn't have to carry. You start noticing patterns you don't like, but by then, you're already attached to the idea of potential, not the reality in front of you. Here's the tricky part. Humans are wired for reward. Your brain loves the highs of emotional investment. A text back after hours of waiting, a date that feels electric even if fleeting, a compliment that makes you feel seen. These tiny hits create a cycle that keeps you chasing. It's like gambling with your emotions, except the stakes are your energy, confidence, and sometimes even your self-worth. The excitement feels good in the moment, but it leaves you empty the next day, and that's exactly why dating feels exhausting. It's not about being unlucky. It's not about having bad timing. It's about your energy being misaligned with the signals you're receiving. The more you give without reciprocity, the more your system tires itself out, and suddenly dating becomes a chore rather than a source of joy. But there's hope, and it starts with noticing the difference between healthy curiosity and overinvestment. Curiosity energizes you. It keeps the interaction playful and light. Overinvestment drains you because it's tied to outcomes you can't control. One is sustainable, the other is a trap. Once you recognize the signs of overinvestment, the constant checking, the overanalyzing, the feeling of carrying the interaction alone, you can step back and rebalance your energy. Imagine this, dating where you feel calm, energized, and still excited. A world where your time is respected and your energy is not being siphoned by someone who isn't fully showing up. That world exists, but only if you start making small, deliberate shifts now. And these shifts aren't about doing more. They're about doing differently, paying attention to what actually fuels connection rather than what drains it. Next, we'll dive into the exact behaviors that keep people feeling exhausted and the practical changes you can make to reclaim your energy without playing games or lowering standards. You'll see how a few simple adjustments can completely change the way dating feels. Now let's get into the behaviors that keep people exhausted, because seeing them clearly is the first step toward changing the experience entirely. One of the most common patterns is what I call chasing clarity. You're constantly looking for answers that aren't being offered. Do they like me? Are they really interested? Will they commit? And while these questions feel important, they actually create tension. You're trying to solve uncertainty with mental effort instead of observing behavior, and your nervous system interprets that as stress. Another behavior is over-explaining. You justify your actions, your emotions, your boundaries, hoping that if you provide enough information, the other person will respond in the way you want. Here's the catch. Healthy dating doesn't require explanation overload. If someone is interested and aligned, they'll show up. You don't have to carry the entire interaction on your shoulders. When you do, you're not building connection, you're building exhaustion. Then there's over-accommodation. You adjust your schedule, your needs, even your values, trying to make the relationship work before it's fully formed. A small compromise is fine, but constant bending creates imbalance. And imbalance always comes at the expense of your energy. Think about it. If you're giving more than you're receiving, your body senses it. That tired, heavy feeling isn't just mental, it's physical. Here's something people rarely talk about: emotional multitasking. You're dating multiple people or keeping multiple options open and trying to compare and control every outcome. On paper, it sounds strategic. In reality, it's exhausting. The mind and heart are not designed to manage multiple deep connections at once. Splitting attention creates anxiety, confusion, and a constant background stress that can make even fun dates feel draining. So how do you stop this cycle without retreating completely? The key is selective energy. You start observing behavior instead of imagining potential. You invest where there is evidence of consistency, interest, and alignment. You stop carrying interactions that are one-sided, and you stop using hope as a substitute for action. Once you implement these shifts, dating stops being a grind and starts feeling lighter. You're still curious, still engaged, but you're not constantly giving away energy that isn't returned. And here's the exciting part. When you adjust these behaviors, the people who were previously exhausting suddenly feel different. The dynamic changes. You feel freer, more in control, and the dating experience becomes energizing instead of draining. Next, we'll explore the final piece, the mindset that transforms dating entirely. It's not about tactics or texts, but about how you show up, how you preserve energy, and how you create space for real connection to flourish. That shift is where dating stops feeling like work and starts feeling like it was meant to feel all along. The mindset that transforms dating starts with one simple but powerful principle. Your energy is your most valuable currency. Every interaction, every message, every date costs energy, and the people who truly deserve it are the ones who show up in ways that respect that investment. Once you adopt this perspective, your approach to dating changes entirely. You stop trying to make someone fit into your life and start noticing who naturally belongs there. This doesn't mean you become rigid or transactional. It means you become intentional. You notice patterns, you respond rather than react, and you preserve your emotional bandwidth for connections that genuinely have potential to grow. And here's the subtle but crucial point. When you protect your energy, the dynamic shifts. Suddenly you're not the one chasing, you're the one being noticed. The push-pull that used to feel exhausting now becomes effortless balance. Another element of this mindset is clarity about standards, not rules or rigid checklists, but clear boundaries about what you need to feel safe, valued, and energized. Dating becomes less about managing uncertainty and more about assessing compatibility. When someone repeatedly crosses a boundary or fails to match your effort, it's no longer a personal failure or something to overthink. It's data. And data allows you to make informed choices, not emotionally taxed ones. Now, here's where the excitement returns. When you combine energy awareness with clear boundaries, you start experiencing dating as it was meant to feel, stimulating, playful, and energizing. Dates become a chance to explore connection, not a stress test of your patience. Conversations feel alive, not rehearsed. Interest feels mutual, not one-sided. And the mental exhaustion that used to define the process, it evaporates. Finally, adopting this mindset isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. You'll still encounter people who drain you or situations that test your patience. But instead of letting those moments define your entire dating experience, you use them as guidance. They teach you where to focus your attention, where to step back, and how to stay aligned with the life and love you actually want. Dating no longer has to feel like an endless grind. It can feel exciting, empowering, and even joyful if you start protecting your energy, noticing patterns, and showing up in ways that serve both yourself and the connection you're cultivating. And the truth is, when you approach it this way, not only does the exhaustion disappear, but the love and connection you were searching for all along becomes far easier to recognize, far easier to sustain, and far more fulfilling than you ever imagined.